The cold tea in the chipped mug had been sitting for 14 minutes. Admiral Sira Wren lifted it to her lips. She drank it anyway. The war chamber smelled of recycled air and old copper. Outside the viewport, 3,200 Drakari ships hung in formation waiting. On the main screen, High Commander Dravik Vex filled the frame, his hammered bronze skin catching the station's pale light. His voice carried like a war horn through the speakers. "You have 1 hour to vacate this station," he said, "or we will board and remove you by force." Wren set the mug down. The crack in the glaze caught the light, a thin hairline fracture older than most of the crew. She said, "Have you read the Meridian Charter?" Vex's slit pupils narrowed. "The charter is irrelevant. We have the ships." Article 17, subsection 4, clause 12, she said. "Any uncertified incursion into human-administered space is hostis humani generis, enemies of all humanity. You have not been certified." The silence that followed was not the silence of surrender. It was the silence of a 9,000-year-old empire realizing it had never read the fine print. Wren smiled. She smiled like someone who had been waiting for this moment for 309 years and knew it was finally here. She smiled. He didn't understand why. That smile would be the last thing he remembered being certain about. That same mug had been filled with hot tea 12 hours earlier. The Aethelgard spire had been quiet then. Wren had poured the tea herself, watching the steam curl above the chipped rim. She was the only human admiral on station. With one ship, the last remnant, docked at the lower ring, the Drakari fleet had not yet arrived. She remembered the day the charter was signed. She had not been born yet. No human alive had been. But the files were still there. Buried in the Concorde's archive, 847 pages of dense legal text that nobody had bothered to read in generations. She had read them, all of them, twice. The alarms came at 0412 station time. A Drakari war fleet, 3,200 vessels, jumped into the system at the outer marker. Wren had expected this. She had been expecting it for years. She walked to the war chamber. The Thorani elder Sarkesh was already seated in the highest row. Her feathered crest flat against her skull, her large dark eyes fixed on the main display. She had been present at the signing of the charter, 309 years ago. She had not spoken of it since. The room filled with officers, humans, a few Thorani aides, a lone Velian observer. Vex's ultimatum came through the channel, repeated verbatim. His face loomed on the screen, bronze and unblinking. He did not look at the officers, he looked only at Wren. "You have 1 hour," he repeated. Wren did not answer. She turned to her tactical officer, Commander Morrison. He was young, barely 30, and his hands trembled over his data slate. "Sir," he said, "the deployment pattern, it matches a protocol I've never seen." Article 17, subsection 4. "But I don't understand what that means." "It means they never read it," Wren said. "Read what?" "The Charter of Meridian, signed 309 years ago by the humans." She paused. "And by the Drakari." Morrison blinked. "But we didn't have a fleet then." "We were barely in the Concorde. The Drakari had already conquered 7 systems. We didn't need a fleet," she said. "We had a pen." Sarkesh spoke from above. Her voice was dry, ancient, like wind over old stone. "I was present at the signing." The Drakari delegates did not read the document. They signed because they were told it was the standard form. It was not. Morrison looked up. What was it? Sarkesh leaned forward, her dark eyes reflecting the screen. It was a cage. And they have been inside it for 309 years. Wren picked up her mug. The tea had gone cold again. She drank it anyway. She turned back to the screen. Vex was still waiting, his patience thinning. He did not know what she knew. He did not know that the Drakari Empire had been built on a signature that had never been read. "Commander Morrison," she said, "pull up the full text of the charter. Section 17, subsection 4. All clauses. Read it aloud." Morrison hesitated. "Sir, that's classified." The Concorde is not here," Wren said. "I am. Read it." Morrison scrolled through the data, his face shifting from confusion to something else, something like dread. "Article 17, he began. Subsection 4, Regulation of Military Incursion. Clause 1. Any armed force entering human-administered space must provide certification of intent, ratified by the human delegation to the Concorde. Clause 2. Failure to provide certification shall be considered an act of war. Clause 3. In the event of an uncertified incursion, the human delegation reserves the right to... He stopped. Keep reading, Wren said. Clause 12, Morrison continued, his voice dropping, any uncertified incursion is hostis, humani generis enemies of all humanity. The offending delegation's Concord membership is immediately revoked. All territories, bases, and assets under that delegation's control are reclassified as human-administered territory. No appeal. No review. No mercy. The chamber went silent. Wren could hear the hum of the station's life support, the distant thrum of the Drakari engines outside. That's why you smiled, Sarkesh said, her voice almost soft. You knew. You have always known. Wren set the mug down. The crack caught the light again. Vex, she said, do you still have 1 hour? On the screen, Vex's bronze face twitched. He had heard the reading. He understood the words. But he did not yet understand what they meant. You are bluffing, he said. I am not, Wren said. And you have 59 minutes to read the document your ancestors signed. I suggest you start now. Vex's image flickered. He turned to someone off-screen, a subordinate, and gave a sharp command. The channel went to silence. Morrison exhaled. Sir, if this is real, if we really have that authority, why didn't we use it before? Because the Drakari never gave us a reason, Wren said. Until now. Every system they conquered, they did it without violating the Charter's technical terms. They always had some old treaty, some loophole. But today, they crossed a line. They declared war without certification. The Charter was written to catch that exact move. She looked at the screen where Vex was now hunched over a data reader, scanning frantically. He will not find a way out, Sarkesh said. I helped write the document. There is no loophole. Wren nodded. We carry the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, and we never needed to fire a shot to prove it. She lifted the mug to her lips. The tea was stone cold, but she drank it all the same. She set the mug down and watched Vex's face on the screen. His slit pupil eyes scanned the document at a frantic pace, the bronze plates of his brow tightening. He was looking for a door where there was only a wall. The timer in the corner of the display read 58 minutes and some seconds. Morrison leaned closer to his own console. Sir, his officers are pulling up the Drakari translation of the Charter. That translation was done by the Drakari themselves, Sarkesh said from the highest row. They used their own legal scholars. They did not consult us. Wren nodded. They translated it to fit their own assumptions. That is what will break them. Vex's face snapped back to the main screen. His voice carried the first crack of uncertainty, a slight hesitation before the warhorn blare. Human, your charter applies to the original text. But we signed a translation. Our translation has no Clause 12. Our version allows for military certification by regional authorities, our own authorities. Wren did not blink. The Meridian Charter, Article 1, Subsection 1, in any dispute of interpretation, the human-authored text in the standard galactic tongue shall hold singular and irrevocable authority. She tapped her console. The text appeared on the screen in standard galactic. The Drakari script beside it, the human text had a full paragraph. The Drakari version had half a sentence. The rest had been accidentally omitted by their scribes. You signed the standard galactic version, Wren said. You just never read it. The silence on Vex's bridge stretched for 6 seconds. Then he turned away from the screen, and his officers began shouting over each other. The image on Wren's side flickered. The Drakari command deck was in chaos. Lieutenant Drex, Vex's young aide, was pointing at a data slate, his voice pitching higher with each word. Vex backhanded the slate across the room. Morrison let out a low breath. They're losing it. They're realizing they lost it 309 years ago, Wren said. She reached for the mug again, but her fingers stopped short of the handle. She let her hand rest on the console instead. The crack in the glaze caught the light, a thin seam of fracture that had never spread, never widened, never broken. From the highest tier, Sarkesh's comm unit lit up. The elder raised a feathered hand, silencing the room. She listened for a long moment, her dark eyes fixed somewhere in the middle distance. Then she lowered the device. The Concord Council is convening, she said. All 46 member species are demanding a full reading of the Charter. They want to know if the Drakari are truly in violation. Wren turned toward her. Let them read it. It's public record. It has been public record for 3 centuries, Sarkesh said. The public never read it. Only the humans did. I told you all that day. I said read the document. The 387 who voted to admit the Drakari laughed. They said paper is paper. She paused. The 12 who voted no had read it. They knew. Sarkesh looked down at Ren. The 12 are dead now, but their names are still in the record. The council is asking who wrote the charter. Ren met her gaze. What did you tell them? I told them the truth, Sarkesh said. The humans wrote every word. The humans drafted every clause. The humans filed the document. And the humans, she gestured at Ren, the humans have been waiting ever since. The communications panel on Ren's left lit up with a priority sigil Earth command. Direct channel. Ren accepted it. General Ira Cass, silver-haired and pale, filled a small window on the auxiliary screen. His voice was tight. Admiral, we are monitoring your situation. The Joint Chiefs are in emergency session. They want to know your endgame. Ren turned her chair slightly. Endgame is already written, General. I'm reading it out loud. Cass's jaw tightened. You have one ship. They have 3,200. The Concorde hasn't seen a war in 9 millennia. You're about to trigger the first one. The Chiefs are telling me to instruct you to stand down. General, Ren said, I am the senior caretaker officer in this sector. I answer to the Charter, not to the Chiefs. The Charter outranks Earth Command in matters of extraterritorial administration. You are one admiral with a chipped mug and a legal document. I am one admiral with a chipped mug and the full weight of 847 pages of unassailable law. Cass stared at her for 3 beats. Then he killed the channel. Sarkesh cocked her feathered head. Your own leaders do not understand what you have built. They will, Ren said. After this hour, everyone will understand. She turned back to the main screen. Vex had returned, his posture different. Less conqueror, more cornered predator. His voice dropped an octave. It was the voice of someone who had stopped trying to find a legal escape and had started looking for a tactical one. Admiral, I'm ordering you to stand down from your station. If you refuse, I will board your vessel and arrest you for obstruction. I will not wait for certification. I will not wait for your counsel. I will take what I came for. Ren leaned forward. You have 51 minutes left. Vex's right gauntlet slammed the console on his side. The feed shook. I have 3,200 warships. You have one. What are you going to do, Admiral? Read me to death. No, Ren said. I'm going to show you what 309 years of preparation looks like. She touched another panel. On the auxiliary screen, a new interface opened, the Caretaker Protocol. It had been in standby mode since the day the charter was signed. She had activated the final key the moment Vex's fleet jumped into the system. The protocol ran through 47 Concorde installations. 12 of them were Drakari bases. All of them had human caretakers stationed inside. One of them was a young officer named Jia Wei. She was 27 years old, stationed on the Drakari supply hub at Osiris Prime. She had been there for 5 years. She had never fired a weapon. Her job was to maintain the station's administrative logs and make sure the water recyclers worked. She had also memorized Clause 12. Ren brought up the remote feed. Jia Wei was standing in the hub's main control room. On her console, the Caretaker Protocol flashed a single word, execute. She touched the button. Across 12 Drakari military bases, human caretakers followed the exact same sequence of commands. They did not sabotage, they did not destroy. They took administrative control. Station logins were overridden. Navigation systems were rerouted through human-approved nodes. Weapons locking protocols were suspended pending recertification. On Vex's bridge, alarms began to shriek. Drex was shouting, Commander, we are losing uplink to the supply bases. The Osiris hub is reporting a system takeover. The crew is locked out of their own consoles. Vex spun on his subordinate. How? Who? Humans, Drex said. The station caretakers. They've been there the whole time, Commander. The protocol was already installed. Vex turned back to the main screen. His bronze face was no longer a mask of certainty. It was a ruin of recognition. You planted your people in our bases, he said, his voice barely above a war horn's whisper. For 3 centuries, not planted, Ren said. We were invited. Your ancestors gave us caretaker rights in the charter. They called it administrative assistance. We called it preparation. She pulled up the protocol status report. 12 bases locked down, 43 system outposts rerouted. 8 Drakari logistics corridors now routed through human-approved checkpoints. The words scrolled across the auxiliary screen, Caretaker Pro-Encall active. 100% success. 0 casualties. Vex stared at the numbers. This isn't war. This is theft. This is administration, Ren said. You conquered through force. We conquered through paper. The difference is force breaks. Paper stays. On the Drakari flagship, a new alert flashed. Orange, then red. Vex's chief engineer ran to a secondary console and began hammering commands. Nothing responded. Commander, the engineer said, his voice pitched high. The ship's navigation system is receiving external override commands. We have been flagged as an uncertified vessel under Clause 12. The system is requiring recertification before it allows any jump or weapons discharge. Vex slammed both fists on his console. Report it? I can't. The override code is in the original charter. The humans control the authentication servers. Vex straightened. The Conqueror's plate on his shoulders seemed heavier now. The etched battle scars, all 17 of them, caught the station's pale light like silver threads in bronze, but the weight in his posture was new. It was the weight of a man who had climbed a mountain and found the summit was on fire. He looked at the countdown on his screen. 47 minutes left. He looked at the small human admiral on the station's screen. She had not moved from her chair. The chipped mug sat beside her hand, untouched now. Her smile had faded into something quieter, something that was not amusement and not victory. It was patience. The patience of someone who had finished her work and was waiting for the world to catch up. You did not need a fleet, Vex said. The words came out flat, stripped of his war-horn tone. No, Ren said. We did not. He looked at his officers. They were staring at him. Some of them had served under him for 40 years. He had conquered systems with them. He had seen them die in the glory of war. They had never looked at him like this, like he was a man who had led them into a paper cage. Vex turned back to the screen. What happens now? Ren lifted the mug. She did not drink from it. She just held it, letting the hairline crack face the screen. Now, she said. The Concord Council reads the charter. They will ask you to leave. If you refuse, the caretaker protocol will escalate. We will not fire a single shot. We will simply lock every system you own until you have no choice but to walk away. Vex's gauntlet hovered over the shutdown command for his comms, but he did not press it. He was watching her, watching the small human with the broken cup and the unshakable voice. How did you know? He asked. How did you know we would never read it? Ren set the mug down. The crack caught the pale light. Because you never needed to, she said. You had been conquering for 9,000 years. You never had to read a document before. You always had the guns. You thought the guns would always be enough, but you forgot. She paused. Guns do not write treaties. Guns do not hold records. Guns do not wait. She looked at the countdown. 45 minutes. The guns are still there, Commander, but they do not belong to you anymore. They belong to the paper. Vex opened his mouth. No sound came out. He was no longer the conqueror. He was a man who had just learned that the empire he had spent his life building was resting on a clause he had never bothered to translate. He closed his mouth. He did not give an order. He did not move. He stood frozen, his bronze hand still hovering over the console, his eyes locked on the woman who had beaten him without a single weapon. The timer ticked down. 44. Sarkesh rose from her seat, her small bird-like frame casting a long shadow across the chamber floor. She looked down at Ren and said, You have done what none of us could do in 9,000 years. You have made them listen. Ren shook her head. No, I just made them red. That is all it ever takes. She reached for the mug one more time. Her fingers closed around the handle. She did not lift it. She just held it there, a small cracked piece of ceramic from a planet that the galaxy had dismissed for 3 centuries. She looked at Vex, frozen on her screen. 42 minutes, she said. You have 42 minutes to make a decision. Read the document, or leave the system. Those are your only choices. Vex did not answer. He could not answer. He was still standing, but the empire inside him had just fallen down. The bridge on the Immortal Resolve erupted into a new kind of chaos, not the shouting of battle commands that had stopped. This was the sound of a command structure eating itself alive. Vex's chief of staff, a battle-scarred Drakari named Korvath, was screaming at the navigation officer. The navigation officer was screaming back. Vex stood in the center of it all, his bronze hands pressed flat against the main console, his slit pupil eyes fixed on the woman who had just dismantled his empire with a mug of cold tea. Then a new voice cut through the noise, a thin, reedy voice from the comm station. It was Lieutenant Drex, The young aide Vex had backhanded earlier. He was holding a data slate, his face pale beneath the bronze plating. "Commander," he said, "I found something. The Charter's Clause 12, there's a procedural exception. If the incursion was preceded by a formal notification to a human delegate, the certification requirement is waived." Vex turned slowly. His eyes locked onto Drex. "Then we notified someone. Who?" Drex swallowed. "The records show a notification sent to a human delegate on the Aethelgard Spire. 4 hours before we arrived. The delegate's name is Admiral Sira Wren." Vex straightened, his shoulders lifted. Then she received it. She failed to respond. "The exception applies." On the station's main screen, Wren's face did not change. She raised one hand, cutting off Morrison before he could speak. "The notification was addressed to me," she said. "I received it. I did not respond." Vex's voice rose, the war horn returning. "Then the exception stands. Your own charter lets us through." Wren reached for her console and pulled up a single file. She tapped it, and a document appeared on the screen. It was the notification, but below the header, a small line of text flashed in red. "Section 3, subsection 2, she read aloud, "A notification is valid only if the delegate named holds active certification from the human delegation to the Concord. I hold that certification, but the notification was not addressed to my official title. It was addressed to Admiral Sira Wren, caretaker." She paused. "The notification omitted the word authority. Under the Charter, the omission invalidates the notice. You notified a person, not an office. The office is what matters." Vex's face went slack. He turned to Drex, who was scrolling frantically. "She's right," Drex whispered. "The form requires the full title. We used the short form." Vex did not scream. He did not smash anything. He simply stood there, the bronze plates of his brow tightening until they seemed to creak. Then he said, "What is the point of an empire that can be defeated by a missing word?" Wren answered. "That is the point, Commander. An empire that does not read its own contracts is not an empire. It is a house built on sand, and the tide has come in." From the highest tier, Sarkesh raised her comm unit again. Her voice was calm but carried a new edge of urgency. "Admiral, the Concord Council has reached a preliminary vote. 42 species are present. A motion has been introduced to suspend the Charter's enforcement pending a full review." The motion was put forward by the Krellian delegate. Wren turned. "Krellian? They have no stake in this. They are neutral traders. They are also the species that lost 3 trade routes to the Drakari last century." Sarkesh said. "They are not neutral. They are terrified of a power vacuum. If the Drakari fall, who fills the space?" Wren's jaw tightened. "The Charter fills the space. That was the design. The Krellian do not see it that way. They have called for a recess to examine the Charter's original drafting records. They want to prove that the humans wrote it without proper authorization from the Concord's founding species." Wren stood. She walked to the main display and pulled up a document, the original filing receipt. It was dated Galactic Year 8712, the day the Charter was signed. In the signature block, there were 3 names, a Thorani, a Velian, and a human. The human's name was Admiral Sira Wren, the same name, but a different person. Her grandmother, "This is the filing receipt," she said. "Signed by my grandmother, Admiral Alara Wren, on behalf of the human delegation." It was witnessed by Sarkesh, who is still alive, and by the Velian Elder Tivok, who is also still alive. "The authorization is valid. The Krellian are stalling." Sarkesh nodded slowly. "Then the Council will vote. The motion to suspend requires a 2/3 majority. If it passes, the caretaker protocol will be frozen until the review is complete. That gives Vex time. How much time? The review could take months. The Drakari fleet would remain in the system, uncertified but unchallenged, while the Council deliberates." Wren looked at the screen. Vex was watching her, his face unreadable. He had heard the exchange. He understood the stakes. "You see, Admiral," he said, "even paper can be burned by enough fire." Wren stepped back to her chair. She did not sit. She reached for the mug, lifted it, and held it in both hands. The crack in the glaze was a thin white line against the pale gray ceramic. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she turned to Morrison. "Commander, pull up the Charter's original text, the one stored in the sealed vault. Not the public version." Morrison hesitated. "Sir, the sealed vault requires a dual authentication." Only you and Sarkesh have the keys. Then we use them. Sarkesh rose from her seat, her small frame descending the tiered steps with surprising speed. She reached Ren's console and placed her feathered hand on the authentication pad. Ren placed her own palm beside it. The screen flashed green. The sealed version opened. It was not 847 pages, it was 848. The final page had been hidden, a single sheet titled The Meridian Appendix. Morrison read it aloud. Appendix to the Meridian Charter. In the event of a procedural deadlock or council suspension, the caretaker protocol shall automatically escalate to Level 2. Level 2 authorizes the immediate transfer of all contested assets to human-administered trust status pending final resolution. No vote required. No appeal. No review. Vex's voice cut through. That is not in the public record? No, Ren said. It is in the sealed record. The one your ancestors never asked to see. The one you are still not asking to see. She set the mug down. The crack caught the light. Your move, Commander! The countdown on the auxiliary screen ticked past 35 minutes. Vex's bridge had gone still. Every officer on the Immortal Resolve was watching their commander, waiting for a decision that none of them could make for him. Then a new voice spoke, an old voice, rasping and dusty, from the back of Vex's bridge. A Drakari scholar, stooped and thin, emerged from the shadows. His ceremonial robes were tattered, his bronze skin dull with age. He carried a leather-bound scroll in his trembling hands. Commander, he said, I have found something, a treaty signed by the Drakari Empire and the Yillos Confederacy. It predates the Charter by 3 centuries. It grants the Drakari permanent rights to all systems within this quadrant, including Ethelgard. Vex's eyes widened. Why have I never seen this? It was sealed after the Xylos went extinct. The treaty was considered void when they died, but the scholar opened the scroll. The treaty contains a clause. If any successor species to the Xylos appears, the treaty is automatically reinstated. And the humans are the successor species. The Xylos were humanoid. They left genetic markers. The humans match. The room went silent. Even the hum of the station's life support seemed to pause. Ren's hand tightened on the mug. Her face remained calm, but something in her posture shifted, a micro-tension in her shoulders. She had not known this. She had not prepared for this. Vex's smile returned thin, predatory, the smile of a man who had just found a door in the wall. It seems your paper has a counterpiper, Admiral. What do you have to say to that? Ren looked at the scholar, then at the scroll, then at Sarkesh. Sarkesh's feathered crest flattened. The Xylos were real, but they went extinct 9,000 years ago. Their genetic markers were absorbed by many species. The claim is too broad to hold. Broad enough, Vex said, to call for a review. And while the Council reviews, my fleet stays here. Your caretaker protocol cannot escalate against a claim that predates the Charter. The timer showed 29 minutes. Ren reached into her jacket pocket. She pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, the pressed fern from her console. She unfolded it and placed it on the console beside the mug. This fern, she said, is from the Appalachian Mountains on Earth. It is a species called Dryopteris marginalis. It grows only in one place on one planet. But the same chemical signature appears in the Xylos burial sites on the moon of Osiris. That moon is now a Drakari military base. She looked up at the scholar. You never mentioned that, because you didn't know. The Xylos did not go extinct. They were absorbed by humans. We are their genetic descendants. And the treaty you just found, it applies to us. We are the successor species. The treaty does not give the Drakari rights. It gives the rights to the Xylos. And we are the Xylos. The scholar's scroll trembled in his hands. He read the fine print. His face grayed beneath the bronze. She is correct, he whispered. The treaty specifies the Exios as the sole beneficiary. If humans are Xylos, then the Drakari have no claim. They are the invaders. Vex's smile collapsed. His hands dropped from the console. He looked at the scholar, then at Ren, then at his officers, all of them staring at him, waiting for a solution that was no longer there. The timer showed 27 minutes. Ren reached for the mug. She lifted it, and for the first time, she took a sip. The tea was ice cold. She drank it slowly, deliberately, letting the pause stretch. Then she set it down and said, "The meridian is not a line, it is a threshold, and you have crossed it." She tapped her console. The sealed appendix flashed on every screen in the chamber. Level 2 is now active. The Aethelgard system is transferred to human-administered trust status. All Drakari ships are to depart within the hour, or they will be considered forfeit assets under the trust. She looked at Vex. You have 27 minutes. Vex's gauntlet clenched into a fist. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. He was a man who had run out of doors, out of walls, out of paper. He had only the guns left, and the guns were no longer his. The timer showed less than 30 minutes. Vex stood frozen on the bridge of the immortal resolve, his gauntlet still clenched, his bronze face a mask of ruin. His officers waited, his fleet waited, the galaxy waited, and he did nothing. Ren watched him through the screen. She did not speak, she did not press. She simply waited. Then, slowly, Vex's hand unclenched. He turned to the scholar with the scroll and said, "Bring me the charter, the original standard galactic text, not the translation, not the summary, the full document." The scholar hesitated. "Commander, that is 847 pages. Bring it." The scholar scurried away. Vex turned back to the screen, his eyes meeting Ren's. For the first time, there was no threat in them. There was something else. A question. "You knew," he said. "You knew about the Xylos. You knew about the treaty. You knew about the Fern. You knew everything." Ren shook her head. "I knew the charter. I knew the appendix. The rest," she glanced at the pressed Fern on her console, "the rest was waiting to be found. You found it. That is the difference between us. You only look for weapons. We look for truth." The scholar returned with a thick data slate. The charter, fully rendered in standard galactic. Vex took it from him with both hands. He sat down heavily in his command chair, the Conqueror's plate creaking against the metal. He began to read. The chamber on the station was silent. Morrison stood rigid beside Ren. Sarkesh had returned to the highest tier, her dark eyes fixed on the screen. The timer ticked down minute by minute. 25 minutes passed. 2015. Vex read. He did not look up. He did not speak. He turned page after page, his eyes scanning lines that had been written 3 centuries before he was born. His officers watched him in disbelief. They had never seen their commander read anything longer than a tactical briefing. At the 10-minute mark, Vex stopped. He had reached Article 17, Subsection 4, Clause 12. He read it aloud, his voice flat and hollow. Any uncertified incursion into human-administered space is hostis humani generis. The offending delegation's Concord membership is immediately revoked. All territories, bases, and assets are reclassified as human-administered territory. No appeal, no review. He looked up, and the Appendix Level 2 that is automatic. No vote required. Ren nodded. "Yes." Vex set the data slate down. He sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling of his bridge. The bronze plates of his brow creased with something that was not anger. It was exhaustion. "I have conquered 17 systems," he said. "I have led 47,000 troops into battle. I have never read a document longer than a treaty summary. And now I have read 847 pages. And I have learned that my empire is a shadow on a wall." He turned to Ren. "You did not need a fleet. You did not need a weapon. You only needed paper. And you let us believe we were powerful for 3 centuries, while you held the real power in a mug of cold tea." Ren did not smile. Not yet. Vex stood. He walked to the main console of his bridge. He looked at his officers, at Drex, at Korvath, at the engineer who could not override the system. He looked at the fleet outside the viewport, 3,200 ships that would not fire a single shot. He reached for the comm panel. He opened a channel to the entire Drakari fleet. "All ships. This is High Commander Dravik Vex. We are withdrawing from the Aethelgard system. We are withdrawing from all contested territories. We are returning to our home sectors. I am ordering a full cessation of all military operations pending a complete review of the Meridian Charter." He paused. His voice dropped, losing its warhorn blare. "We have been defeated, not by ships, not by weapons, by words. And I will not sacrifice one more Drakari life for an empire that could not read its own agreements." He closed the channel. He turned to the screen, where Ren was watching him. "I will withdraw," he said. "But I want to know one thing. The smile you gave me when I first arrived, was that planning? Was that victory?" Ren reached for the mug. She lifted it, felt the crack with her thumb. "No," she said. "That was patience. I had been waiting 309 years to say what I said. I was not smiling at you. I was smiling at the moment all the waiting finally meant something. She set the mug down. The crack caught the pale light. Vex looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded once, a slow, heavy dip of his head. "Then your patience has earned its moment," he said. "I will remember it." He turned away from the screen. On the auxiliary display, the Drakari fleet began to turn, massive warships rotating in formation, their engines lighting up as they prepared for the jump back to their own space. One by one, they blinked out of the system. The timer showed 0 minutes. Ren sat back in her chair. She did not celebrate. She did not cheer. She looked at Morrison, who was staring at the empty space outside the viewport. "Commander," she said, "file the transfer paperwork for the Aethelgard system. Level 2 is active." "We are now the administrators." Morrison nodded, his hands still trembling. "Sir, the council will vote," Ren said. "But the vote does not matter. The appendix is already in effect. The systems are ours." Sarkesh descended from her tier and walked to Ren's console. She placed a small feathered hand on the mug. "You have done what no species has ever done," she said. "You have ended an empire without ending a life." Ren shook her head. "I did not end it. They ended it themselves. The moment they chose not to read, they chose to be defeated." She picked up the pressed fern from her console. She held it for a moment, then tucked it back into her jacket pocket. "Commander Morrison, I need you to do one more thing. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them the Caretaker Protocol has succeeded. Tell them we are ready for the next phase." Morrison blinked. "Next phase? Sir, there's more." Ren looked at the mug. The crack in the glaze was a thin white line, a fracture that had never broken. "There are 46 other species in the Concord," she said. "And none of them have read the charter," she smiled. "Not at the screen, not at Morrison, at the mug, at the crack. I will need more tea." "Quiet close." She set the mug down on the console, the crack facing out, facing the empty space where 3,200 ships had been. The pale light caught the fracture, a hairline line older than the Empire's certainty. It had never broken. It had only been waiting to be noticed. She reached for the fern in her pocket. She did not unfold it. She just pressed it against the mug's warm ceramic. The silence of the chamber was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of patience, finally understood. She leaned back in her worn leather chair. The crack held.